Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to take you through a speed draw and kind of just talking about some stuff that I thought might be interesting to cover since I've not done any videos really with my own voice in a substantial amount of time besides the last one that I just put out. So here goes nothing. While I've been away, I've been in college and I took a bunch of courses actually. I was in school up until fall quarter and I left for a medical leave, and I'm kind of just taking some time to work on building up my skills towards independence. And in terms of what I mean by that, I mean things like figuring out how to sustainably have income as well as drive, and I've been dedicating a lot more time to working on skills that can help me towards my future. Going to school was a huge part of that, but for the time being, it is kind of on hold, and I think that it's okay for me to take a little bit of a break. I know that a lot of people have been like, man, like how long have you been in school? And honestly, I haven't been in school for that long. I would have been finishing up my AA associate's degree in the summer if I would have stayed and continued from what I had left off. Among these skills that I've been kind of focusing on and building, I've definitely done a lot of them with my therapist, who's also a specialist in the conditions that the internet thinks that I don't have. But I have been working with her and the concept of narratives and archetypes. And I had posted a bit about this on Patreon as well. But I wanted to dive into it a little bit more deep, especially now that I am trying to get used to hearing my own voice back at me. So the concept of narratives for me is super important when it has come to getting to the stage in my mental health journey. I do think that it is important to evaluate some of the things that were said with a little bit more context, because I think that anyone can fall into a victim mentality, but I think that it is based more so on the narratives that we think about ourselves. So, when it comes to narratives, I believe that there are some narratives that we can instill within ourselves, but also there's a lot that gets pushed onto us through society. And I definitely experienced a lot of that in 2020, and I had to kind of restructure my boundaries and beliefs around what I was going to accept in my life, period. I had kind of distanced myself from everything. I'm not even quite sure how to structure that better, but I had to get back down to the roots of just basic functioning in order to really evaluate what was going on around me. And there were a lot of narratives pushed onto me that I definitely didn't agree with, but I felt like I don't know how to present in a way to the collective, the internet, the world, in a way that's really going to make sense. Because with my situation in particular, it came down to the narrative of my medical and mental illnesses not being legitimate. Um, and this one is very tricky to tackle because I know what I've through within my lived experience, and I know that I don't need to now. I now know. For a while, I was definitely taking a more passive standpoint on this, and not directly tackle something that fundamentally questioned everything that I knew about my reality. Um, I have lived now with a feeding tube for I got one placed and I posted that on my, and that was kind of how I started um, my wellness journey. I have decided for a lot of reasons to kind of keep those details to myself, um, mainly on the basis of the structuring of like the narratives that were being pushed about me. Um, I've said this before, but I cannot make doctors perform surgery on me. That is not a special talent that I possess. I also cannot fool, I can't trick or fool a specialist in a dissociative disorder. Like my therapist literally treats dissociative disorders and complex trauma. So it would be very difficult for me to even try and to continue to gaslight myself or allow the internet to do so. And I think that that's when my narrative kind of shifted around everything. I believe that I think, though, no matter what, there is always going to be some people that will try and question any aspect of who you are. Most of the time, it's just not as big scale ableism as claiming that somebody has faked multiple illnesses. So bringing it back up to a bigger scale thing to make it applicable for many people, the basis of why I feel like I am able to kind of like talk and kind of share what I've learned about myself through this year of intensive therapy is structured around validation and boundaries as well as narratives. So when I say that I don't need your guys' validation, it isn't to sound cocky or to gaslight you or to invalidate your opinion of what you feel about me. It is more so to say that I have put down a boundary in place in which I don't let people decide my reality for me. And that has been one of the most freeing things that I think that I could try and offer from this experience is that your validation and your emotional regulation has to come from within. Because if your ideas of self concepts are so quickly subject to change based on other people's perceptions of you, you get into some dangerous territory. I would not recommend that to anyone to try and let other people who have not met you in person dictate whether you feel that your reality is valid or not. Obviously, there's going to be some cases where you should really look at yourself and be like, is this, what could I work on here? Because if somebody has an issue with you, it is still important for you to hear that out and take accountability. With that being said, I do understand that there were chances that could have been more easily remedied just through the basis of communication. And I think that that could be the next good, like, topic to dive into is because once you've kind of restructured your boundaries and value system to reflect a basis of, I know what I know to be true, and I would like to have that respected. Then it comes to, okay, well, how are you going to interact with the collective on the basis of their knowledge is different from mine? I can't really realistically give you guys more medical documentation. However, I can change the information that I decide to disclose and the manner in which I decide to film my content. I feel that in the past I've been more reactionary to the events that were And now I get to think about like what kind of person do I want to be moving forward? How would I want to structure discourse around violations of consent violations and things of that nature? Is there a way to have healthy conversation about these really hard topics that we keep seeing pop up even in mainstream media? Um, and how would I go about it in a way that could still honor this new value system that I have? Because I didn't want to speak out in a way that could cause harm that was unintentional, or intentional. I didn't want to think about speaking out until I felt like I had really done that inner work that I needed to progress within my own healing. And now that I've done that, I can kind of see what's what things am I willing to discuss and at what length. What word choice would I use differently this time? Um, and what communication skills would I use differently this time? And I don't know if people will see a difference. I don't know if it's even going to make anyone's feelings about me change. But I do know that the things that I want to offer and the experiences that I want to have and the experiences that I have had have led me to want to live in a way that is vulnerable. And I tried to express that before on my channel, and it came with a lot of even my own oversharing and over disclosing of certain aspects of my past. And I don't condone that behavior. I don't think that it really served anyone, present or past tense. And I think that there are probably a lot better ways to go about having a conversation rather than labeling certain people as good or bad, because in some situations, some, it is not as black and white as good and bad people. And this is where it actually ties into skills like DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. This is incredibly important for those with borderline. It is one of the most used treatment methods to treat borderline. Started out of Seattle, Washington, and it basically goes into the process of, all right, this is my logical side of my mind. This is the emotional side of my mind. And in the middle, we're going to find like that gray space, right? Where I can still have agency over my emotions. I'm allowed to feel what I'm feeling, but I don't make it other people's responsibility to then help soothe, help correct, or manipulate a situation to make people feel bad for you. That's not the MO of that situation. So when you want to get into that wise mind, it can be rather tricky, especially when you're dealing with trauma. And for me, it's taken me the better part of almost exactly a year to like really get these thoughts out and have them be something that I even feel like is worth sharing with you guys, because a lot of the conversations that I'm seeing about accountability, narratives, and archetypes, they all kind of echo the same judgmental passing of judgment. And that doesn't fall within my value system. I would like to consider myself a rather open and welcoming person. I would like to say that people feel safe to come to me with their problems, whatever they may be going through in their life. And I do have a great support system in which like we all kind of bounce off of each other. And if somebody's having a poor day, like we're there for each other. And I think that that is one of the most beautiful things that I've learned throughout this process is who was really going to be there for me and who wasn't. Um, and who had the capacity, who was at there in their recovery journey with their mental health or whatever they may have gone through to actually show up and hear what I was saying and not pass judgment before really seeing it, like really understanding the gravity of both sides. I mean, with all being said, there was clear effects on everyone who was involved. But I did not think that I even had the agency to speak out due to the fact that I was a little bit afraid of what would happen next. Like, I woke up on edge a lot for spring of last year. And it wasn't until fall, um, when I got like any feeling of security back. And it was a long journey. Um, I am grateful for the skills that I've learned, but I am not grateful for the experience of 2019 till present. I also had to I also had to transition, which is something that I'm not gonna talk about at length, but I came to a point when everything was stripped down in that really lonely state where I was just like, I, if this is if this is what it's gonna be like, I absolutely cannot go on with this dysphoria. I cannot. Um, it was always something in the back of my head that I had kind of placed as something I wasn't going to evaluate. I didn't really think too much about if I was going to medically transition again or not until I really just I couldn't take it anymore. Like when I had other people around me, it was very easy to be manipulated into kind of just being like, yeah, this works for me. This is great. I'll be the pretty bimbo, whatever, you know, but I realized that I wasn't happy, and that there was a lot of stuff from the past that didn't actually get dug up. And I started to remember my high school years. I started to remember being in junior high and being the only out queer person in my school district and how weird that felt. It wasn't something that I wanted to do willingly either. I was forced out of the closet by somebody that I was in a relationship with, and he was not happy about that. And that terminated that relationship, and suddenly I felt like I had this huge responsibility to everyone else who was in the closet still. And I lived my entire junior high and high school experience around, I think, fuck, probably like eighth grade is when I came out as trans. And this is information that I kind of kept mostly offline. I have one video that talks about why I decided to detransition at one point in my life. And a lot of it had to do with my job as an online entertainer in the adult media realm. And that's still an issue that comes up. Um, I mean, I'm on HRT, I'm on testosterone. Um, I need to get my prescription refilled actually, but I decided to do that late last fall, and yeah, so that's another aspect of setting these boundaries with myself included. Like, I had to decide literally that it was not worth it to me to live a life that was inauthentic to myself. Um, and I feel like that's the only inauthenticity that I had actually presented while being online, um, which is even more terrifying to kind of think about, and why I don't have a lot of my content up. A lot of my past content will remain unlisted, but as I've gone farther into my trauma processing, I'm still technically on safety and stabilization when it comes to my treatment plan. But when it comes to processing everything that had happened, I don't want to leave room for anyone to release information without my consent ever again. And that's very difficult because as an online person, that's an inherent risk that we take, right? But being doxxed and stalked shouldn't be one of them, I don't think. In my humble opinion, I don't recommend you do that to any creators at all. It is one of the worst privacy violations that had gone on, um, and the contacting of people that I worked with as well. Um, I've I've lost I've lost some people due to their own boundaries of not wanting to associate with me due to the inherent risks that I kind of pose with having a huge target on my back, and uh, a loudmouth that's a little bit more respectful now, especially now that we're not letting Quinn uh, be out as frequently. And when she is, she has to be accountable. Um, but, you live and you learn. And I think that our system has learned a great deal about system accountability, a concept that we thought that we really had like a good grasp on. That there was a lot of things said and done um, on all parties that needs more accountability. But I'm not sure what YouTube wants accountability to look like from their creators. Um, System accountability within DID works a little bit differently, and I've always gone off of the basis of if this body does it, we're all responsible. But when it comes to online accountability, I'm not sure that there is a good setup for that yet. Um, and I think that the audience would have to ask themselves, what would taking accountability look like? What could a creator do if they had done harm to repair that damage? And I've thought about that a lot when it comes to the aid that I've received in terms of mutual aid. I have been donating to various different GoFundMes, but one in particular. And I'm going to be keeping that one anonymous. And I don't really want to have to play the receipt game, because with mutual aid and donations, it should never be about making yourself feel better. It was something I wanted to do and continued to do while being actively harassed. I was doing mutual aid drops and helping out my community. I even went to the Black Lives Matter protests in Seattle, Washington. I was there for when Cal Anderson got raided, and there's a lot that has happened and a lot that has shaped my viewpoints and how I would like to carry forward with the direction of this channel. It's not going to be the same type of stuff that you're going to find of commentary channels discussing people. I want to discuss the collective. I want to discuss how we can better have discourse that is based on accountability in a way that can be measured. When you talk about accountability, what does it look like to you? Does it look like somebody repaying that debt? Does it look like somebody making amends? And I would love to know what my audience would like to see moving forward when it out, because I haven't really seen anyone talk about, like, if you want accountability, is there an option besides deplatform? Because I think personally, I don't feel like deplatforming solves the issue of reform. I also don't think that prison solves anything towards reforming the actions that were done to the person who was harmed. Um, that's part of the reason why I didn't go for criminal charges and why every legal thing that I've tried to push forward, other than the case in 2019 where there was a criminal case, I still wouldn't have stand by that action present day, because I don't believe that jail or deplatform offers any room for improvement or growth.